In the run-up to the State of the Union, most of the media were portraying President Biden as being on a roll. He had passed plenty of bipartisan legislation, and Democrats wound up holding the Senate. Then came coverage of some undeniable setbacks. The argument that Biden waited too long to shoot down the Chinese spy balloon, and his mishandling of the classified documents mess, and then some polls that delivered a reality check to the press, especially a Washington Post ABC survey saying 58% of Democrats and Democratic-leading independents do not want Biden to run again. That is a remarkable figure for an incumbent president who is gearing up for a second term. So at odds with the journalistic perception of Biden that it could not be ignored, along with a second finding on what Biden has achieved in office.
He will be speaking to a skeptical public. 2/3 of voters have reservations or are very uncomfortable with the idea of Biden running for a second term.
According to a new Washington Post ABC poll, however, 62% of Americans think Biden has accomplished not very much or little or nothing. And this reality is shocking to the dunderheads in the media.
Make no mistake of it, a lot of Democrats, powerful Democrats, just don't want him to run again in 2024. And it seems most Americans want nothing to do with a Trump-Biden rematch.
Seems like the voters didn't get that memo. AP showed only 22% of Americans want this man to run for a second term, and yet it looks like he's going to.
Some of the doubts are fueled by Biden's age, and perhaps the media are out of touch with how Democrats especially view their leader. I'm Howard Kurtz, and this is Media Buzz. Ahead, Kellyanne Conway joins us to talk media, politics, and the Super Bowl. The media largely praised President Biden's speech, but it's included several partisan shots at the GOP, such as on abortion, while touting bills passed with some Republican backing, such as the big infrastructure law.
And when we do these projects, and again, I get criticized for this, but I make no excuses for it. We're going to buy American.
This is one of the best speeches that Joe Biden has delivered as president.
President Biden's speech full of lies, empty cliches, a classic old-fashioned liberal socialist wish list, full of propaganda, misinformation. And as we speak, you have the folks over at Fake News, CNN, MSDNC, people writing at the New York Times, Washington Post, slobbering over Joe's remarks.
I mean, how happy were Democrats with that State of the Union on a scale of 10 to 10.9? 12.
It was deft. It was nimble. He was fiery and feisty and gave as good or better than he got.
It sounded like an ultra MAGA speech to me. He plagiarized the entire Trump platform. If the guy had had blonde hair and a tan, I thought Trump would have still been president.
Joining us now to analyze the coverage, Emily Jackinsky, culture editor of The Federalist. And in San Diego, Laura Fink, Democratic strategist and founder of Rebel Communications. Emily, before we even get to the speech, have most of the media misjudged Joe Biden's political standing when you have this stunning figure, 58%, and there have been similar polls, who do not want him to run for a second term?
Right, and then there was also the AP poll that Guy referenced in the introduction that found 78% of Americans don't want Joe Biden to run again for president. So 22% say yes, 78% say no, and I think the media was grappling this week with that dose of cold water. It's one of those moments when you see polling just smack the media with some reality, and they realize maybe the public has a very different perception of this presidency than we do.
Right. Well, you say smack. I mean, journalists love polls, so we're trying to get their footing on this. Laura, it is true that in that same Washington Post poll, 49% of Republicans said they don't want Donald Trump to run again. Too late on that. But follow-up interviews found that pollsters, a lot of this came from concerns about Joe Biden's age. Does the press have to do more to acknowledge this elephant in the room?
Well, if I can speak from the Democratic perspective, I think it's about electability. We tend to clutch our pearls a little bit because we worry. When we see candidates like Donald Trump win the presidency in 2016 when we were not expecting it and the damage that that does to the country, I think there's some justifiable worry about Biden's low poll numbers and about the fact that the programs that he has passed are not well known to the American people. I think therein is the upside as well, is that when he communicates, as he did in the State of the Union, about his programs with respect to jobs and infrastructure and bipartisan support, along with the improving economy, you're going to see that this State of the Union was the kickoff to, once again, Biden possibly proving things wrong and making this just a temporal moment in his history.
Right. I mean, he has passed trillions and trillions of dollars that the left should like. He talks about it a lot, but sometimes it's not news. Emily, the media consensus is that Joe Biden, not a great orator, delivered a very forceful speech appealing to blue-collar voters. But isn't it also true that most of what he wants will be blocked by the Republican House? I didn't see much of that in the coverage.
No, that's a really great point. And it's also this point about how he's clearing a very low bar. So the media is clapping for a president whose bar for success is very low.
Who set the bar?
Well, yeah, exactly.
No, I'm serious. Is it the media? Is it the fact that people don't expect great speeches from Joe Biden?
Yeah, I think it's sort of baked into Joe Biden at this age. And to your point earlier about how Americans are perceiving this differently than the media, for Americans, age is a much bigger problem than we see within the media coverage of Joe Biden sort of struggling sometimes with memory and just getting certain sentences out. And that was another thing in the State of the Union speech. He mistitled Chuck Schumer. He got Tyre Nichols' name wrong, unfortunately. These would have been huge blow-ups over the Trump administration. The media just glossed right over them.
So you feel that, I mean, look, Biden has been making gaffes and misspeaking, for 40 years. But obviously, for him, most of the speech was pretty good. But it's interesting that you think the media glossed over it. Laura, the audience for the State of the Union was 27 million. That's the lowest in almost 30 years. And most of these speeches are predictable and dull. So for all the media coverage, does Biden get any boost if most people weren't watching?
Well, I think that we have to reanalyze and look at the State of the Union in a different way, because viewership is lower, but digesting these clips and these sort of viral moments are how so many people are now consuming this news. I think you also have to look at it as the cornerstone of his kickoff for his re-election campaign. And when you look at the navigator dials, you will see that the media coverage praising him is actually reflected in how the American people viewed the speech. 62% viewed it as positive. 38 points say that the country is now moving in the right direction. They're more hopeful. They're more optimistic, all as a result of this speech. And those are real-time dials on the folks that watched that speech. It was highly effective, and there's objective data to prove it.
Well, I was going to say, I agree that we have to adjust our expectations of ratings for streaming, but this was a 30% drop. It's Super Bowl Sunday. The NFL is not seeing drops like that because of streaming. This was something that I think was very particular to Joe Biden, the speech that he gave. When you look at a drop like that, 30%, that's a big nosedive.
I would just throw in the fact that you get a more Democratic audience tuning into a Democratic president. The CNN poll acknowledged that, and the same obviously is true when a Republican president is giving that speech. I thought the emotional highlight was the acknowledgement in the audience of the parents of Tyre Nichols, the young black man who was fatally beaten by 5 Memphis police officers. But a lot of the pregame reporting, Emily, had to do with how the White House was scrambling to change the speech to deal with the argument that President Biden waited too long to shoot down the Chinese spy balloon. Here's how he handled it.
If China threatens our sovereignty, we will act to protect our country, and we did.
That was about the mildest thing he could have said, and he didn't even use the word balloon.
Right, and Axios and NBC ahead of the speech had these big stories about how it was being reworked to deal with what happened with the balloon. He mentioned the word China 6 times and alluded to the balloon without even mentioning it directly, and there was no real media reckoning with it afterwards, that whatever he'd reworked was very mild, which is strange. And then on top of that, places like Bloomberg said he had taunted Xi Jinping, which, if you call that moment taunting, that's something of a reach.
So do you feel like, just briefly, that the press was misled by the White House saying, oh, we're going to be very aggressive in taking this on, or maybe it was many White House aides wanted him to do that, but the president didn't want to go along with it?
No, I think they took the bait, because I think the White House knew what they were going to say ultimately, and the press was sort of led on to expect that there was going to be a big spy balloon moment, and what we got was not even a mention of the spy balloon, so just a sort of indirect reference to it.
It certainly was. People knew what he was talking about. Laura, you want to jump in on this?
Sure, the media loves a spy balloon. That's obvious. It's got a great visual, and they were obsessed with it. But I will say Biden ended his addressing this issue with a standing ovation and the chamber chanting USA, USA, because he stood up strong against China, called out Xi Jinping, and said no world leader would want to trade places with him. So I don't think you can argue that his positioning was not a success.
Well, I would say that probably it was the Democratic part of the chamber that was giving him a standing ovation. I mean, it's very standard.
I think it was the whole one, shall we, on this one?
The other party usually sits on its hands. I mean, both parties do that. By the way, you know, we have this bizarre situation now where the United States has shot down 2 unidentified flying objects in 48 hours. The one over Alaska Friday, and then yesterday, the one over Canada. Nobody knows quite what these are. Have they been around all this time? It's a media mystery. Are we just noticing now? Is it all related to China? So I just wanted to take that note. That story is a very much a work in progress. I'll come back to you, Laura, because some pundits are saying that Biden now has a political foil in House Republicans, that before Democrats controlled everything. So anything that went wrong was the fault of the Democratic Party. And you would have to acknowledge media not exactly sympathetic to the House Republicans.
Well, here's what I would acknowledge. I think that he used them as a foil to demonstrate his bipartisan nature, affably turning to Speaker McCarthy, shaking his hand and saying, I hope I don't, you know, I'm looking forward to working with you. I hope that doesn't ruin your reputation. So I think the foil is sort of a natural situation given the Republican takeover of the House. I think that was acknowledged. I think that's also part of the reason why the speech was a real home run.
Okay. Well, now we come to the part about Super Bowl Sunday, which is, Emily, did Joe Biden miss a big opportunity by declining Fox's invitation for the traditional Super Bowl interview, which would have been with somebody from the news division, Brett Baer or Shannon Breen were being talked about. 100 million people watched the Super Bowl, not as many, but of course the pregame show. So what's your take on that?
I think it's a huge miss. I mean, he should notice that Bernie Sanders has been running an op-eds with Fox News, and especially lately on greedy pharma. He ran an op-ed in Fox News about that, and there's a reason. It's tactically very smart. It's a huge audience, and if you want to prove, I mean, the press has given Biden some cover, actually, for not doing this interview, and said there have been op-eds saying, hey, it's entirely fair because Fox's opinion division is attacking Biden left and right. Well, actually, the media should want him to sit for an interview that's going to be tough. I mean, if anything, that should be applauded by fellow journalists.
Right. So, you know, this tradition began with Barack Obama in 2009. Donald Trump didn't do an interview with NBC in 2018. But Laura, that's a pretty big audience today to walk away from.
It's a big audience. It's a fun topic, but you have to question. I think what he did when he was vice president, he watched Barack Obama go on Fox, get grilled by Bill O'Reilly, when really and not have the sort of interplay that you might want. And it wasn't just because of tough questioning. It was really because of the angle of the interview. And now you see, as you say, how you see presidents of both parties avoiding this. Tactically, a smart move, and, you know, good for Fox, because now we can all talk about how he avoided the interview and how terrible that is. So I think tactically it was a win for the president.
The president would have done fine in the interview. These are professional journalists. It's not Bill O'Reilly, who's an opinion guy. But let me get a break here when we come back. The president and his GOP hecklers. Is the press covering that fairly? And later, a conversation with Kellyanne Conway.
I'm Steve Doocy.
I'm Brian Kilmeade.
And I'm Ainsley Earhart. And click here to subscribe to the Fox News YouTube page to catch our hottest interviews and most compelling analysis.